Good morning to our listeners and viewers from the American continent, and good evening to our listeners and viewers from Europe and Africa. I'm Father Innocent Maganya from Tangaza University in Nairobi, and the chair of the International Conference on Fratelli Tutti, co-chaired by Prof. Gerard Rudzen from the Global Ministries University in California. This conference has been organized in partnership between the Institute of Interreligious Dialogue and Islamic Studies, IRDIS, at Tangaza University in Nairobi, the Global Ministries University in California, Hekima University in Nairobi, the Harmony Institute in Nairobi, and the Forum for Intercultural Dialogue in Frankfurt in Germany. This conference is live and interactive on YouTube. The initiative was inspired by the Abu Dhabi meeting between Pope Francis and Sheikh Al-Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, when they met in Abu Dhabi in 2019, and the subsequent publication of the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti by Pope Francis in 2020 on human fraternity and social friendship. This conference is held every 2 years, and we are now on our 3rd edition. It takes place during the United Nations Human Fraternity Week at the beginning of the month of February. We always take a particular theme from the teaching of Pope Francis. This year, we are focusing on migrants, refugees, and the displaced people, under the theme Belonging Together, Migrants, Refugees, Displaced Person, and Global Solidarity. According to Pope Francis, migration is a fundamental element of humanity's future and a clear opportunity to put the human person back at the center. Migrations, more than ever before, says Pope Francis, will play a pivotal role in the future of our world. At present, however, migration is affected by the loss of that sense of responsibility for our brothers and sisters on which every society is based. Pope Francis adds that the fear of the other, though natural and instinctive, must not undermine the capacity for encounter that makes us grow as a people. An individual and the people are only fruitful and productive if they are able to develop a creative openness to others. Pope Francis continues saying, I ask everyone to move beyond those primal reactions, because there is a problem when doubts and fears conditions our way of thinking and acting to the point of making us intolerant, closed, and perhaps even, without realizing it, racist. In this way, fear deprives us of the desire and the ability to encounter the other. Our keynote address today will be given by Michael Cardinal Czerny, the prefect of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development. He will be addressing us on migration and interreligious dialogue. We thank in advance His Eminence, Cardinal Michael Czerny, and his team for having generously accepted to deliver the opening keynote address today. We know that the issue of migration is at the heart of his concerns, as it is for Pope Francis. The conference will run for 2 days from 3 different hubs. The America Hub, which is based in California, the Africa Hub, which is based in Nairobi, and the European Hub, which is based in Frankfurt, Germany. Once again, on behalf of the Tangaza University administration and on behalf of the steering committee of the Fratelli Tutti International Conference, I welcome you to this timely conversation on migrants, refugees, and displaced people. Refugees, migrants, and displaced people are not a problem. They have a lot to contribute in the host nations. And we hope to continue the conversation even after the conference ends. Once again, I say welcome to this international conference, 3rd edition of Fratelli Tutti on migrants, refugees, and displaced people. Now I would like to invite Dr. Gerald Grudzen, the co-chair of the International Conference on Fratelli Tutti and president of Global Ministries University. Welcome, Dr. Gerald Grudzen.
Thank you very much, Father Innocent. It's my pleasure to be here and to represent Global Ministries University. Global Ministries University was founded 24 years ago to provide theological education across the world, particularly in areas where it's difficult for students to access theological education. And the last 15 years, we have developed programs reaching as far as students in Africa and India and other parts of the world that are without access, easy access to theological education. I just returned from India, from Kochi, India, where we work closely with Father Augustine Pamplani in a program on religion and science, which is one of our largest programs. And it brings together students from Africa and India and the United States to study key issues of religion and science around the world. This theological education on a global scale is very important for helping people to understand that we are part of one global community, one human family. Part of the problem of the world is this fracturing of the world into separate political divisions and different ideologies. So the role of theological education, particularly intercultural theological education, is to narrow the differences that people feel between different parts of the world, different cultures, and different ways of seeing things. Our faculty comes from throughout the world, and the beauty of the internet and of the Zoom faculty that we use and YouTube is that we can connect people in different parts of the world as students and as participants in theological education. We have provided degree programs for students around the world over the last 20 years, and we plan to continue this going forward and continue to expand our outreach to students in areas that do not have access to global theological education. I look forward to this conference and being part of the team that has brought it together. We hope that we'll have good interaction also through the YouTube facility. And thank you to Tangaza University and Akima University and Harmony Institute and the Dialogue Forum in Germany. We have formed this as a common effort spread across the world. And this is part of the mission of Global Ministries University. In addition, part of our mission is interfaith education. Our organization led an interfaith education program in the coastal region of Kenya over the last 15 years in an area that was often fractured by religious differences. So GMU has participated in various forums for interfaith education with the Hizmet movement around the world. I'll be going to Nigeria after this conference to do a series of lectures and interfaith dialogues with a UFOC dialogue program based in Juba, Nigeria. So GMU is interested in promoting interfaith understanding around the world, in particular in Africa. And so I've been invited, representing GMU, to spend almost 2 weeks in Nigeria following this conference. So thank you, everybody, for the efforts that you've made. And we look forward to the conference and to Cardinal Czerny's keynote address in just a short time. Thank you, Father Innocent, for your leadership and that of Tangaza University and IRDIS, and we look forward to a wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gerard, for these welcoming remarks. Now we listen to the remarks from the Forum for Intercultural Dialogue, represented by Mit Yagros. You are welcome.
Thank you, Father Innocent. Dear participants and dear viewers, hello and welcome from the European Hub to the third Global Fratelli Tutti conference with the special topic of belonging together, migrants, refugees, displaced persons, and global solidarity. I would like to thank our cooperation partners, the Global Ministries University, GMU in California, the Tangaza University Institute for Interreligious Dialogue and Islamic Studies, and the Harmony Institute, both in Nairobi, for giving us the Forum for Intercultural Dialogue in Frankfurt, Germany, the privilege to participate in this conference and the opportunity of organizing the European representation of this conference. The Forum for Intercultural Dialogue, founded in 2002, is a non-profit Muslim organization inspired by the Hizmet movement and Fethullah Gülen, and we are engaged in participating in the interreligious and intercultural dialogue here in Germany, which gets more important day by day. Mainly, we do that through educational work and workshops. The program of the European Hub will start tomorrow. Today, Professor Dr. Tobias Specker will give us a quick input to open this conference from the European side. Professor Dr. Specker is a professor for Catholic theology and the faith of Islam at the Philosophical Theological University of St. Georgen in Frankfurt am Main, here in Germany. Professor Dr. Specker will give us a quick talk about biblical perspectives on flight and displacement. And now I will give over to Professor Dr. Specker. Welcome to the conference and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Mitya. Thank you, Father Innocent and Dr. Grutzen. I remember well Tangaza College because I did my third year of formation as a Jesuit not far from you in Karen. And I went by bicycle a lot of times to Tangaza. So I'm very happy to see at least on a digital way, to see you again. And so I was invited, I hope I'm right, to give like a 10 minutes talk about an introductory talk. Would it fit, or does it delay the Cardinal? Because I don't want to be a...
That's fine, that's fine.
That's fine, okay. Okay. So thank you for inviting me to the conference Belonging Together, Migrants, Refugees, Displaced Persons, and Global Solidarity. So as I was already presented, I'm Tobias Specker, a Catholic priest and Jesuit, and I teach Christian-Muslim relation in our Jesuit graduate school here in Frankfurt, and we are in good contact with the Forum für interkulturellen Dialog of the Hizmet movement. So in a very short speech lasting a few minutes, I would like to have a look at two well-known biblical figures who connect Christian and Muslims and also Jews in a special way, Hagar and Ismail. I think you know them from both of our traditions. And I'd like to ask what they can contribute to the theme of humanity's irrevocable responsibility to care for one another. I think we know all the story of Abraham, Hagar, and Ismail from a Christian and Muslim perspective. And we know the accounts saying important things about our religious communities. Biblically, the story of Ismail is a story of blessing, of the first fulfillment of God's promises, and also of peace. It's often overlooked that Ismail and Isaac, his brother, so if you like this metaphor, Judaism and Islam stand together at the grave of their father Abraham. Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, so it's written in the first book of Moses, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar. If you look at the city of Hebron today, what an important dream of different religions living together. Here, the two sons standing peacefully together. And also in Islamic tradition, Abd al-Muttalib mentions Ismail as an ancestor. He's associated with the building of the Kaaba and the spring of Zamzam. And according to some reports, he learned Arabic from the tribes of the Jurhum. So translation is already happening at the roots of the Kaaba. However, it should not be overlooked that Ismail and Hagar is also a story of displaced persons and refugees. In the Bible, Hagar is driven twice from her home with Abraham into the desert. She is in great need there, threatened by thirst and hunger. From the very first beginning, the story of Hagar raises questions about justice and God's faithfulness in the face of people on the run. And it is a story of salvation, of liberation. As it says in the first book of the Bible, the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Anyone who is familiar with the Bible will recognize there are elements of the Exodus story and the story of Hagar, in which Moses leads his people out of Egypt. Both Hagar and Moses have a flight, so they have to fly into the desert. They experience God who hears their lament and the injustice, and they get a special name of God. Adonai, on the one hand, I am who I am to Moses, and El Roi, the one who sees to Hagar and Ismail. The interesting and often overlooked thing is, in the perspective of the Bible, Hagar is an Egyptian woman. In other words, the wife of a people, the female of a people that is a symbol of oppression and injustice in the Bible. But here, she, as an Egyptian, is herself wronged by Sarah, the mother of the people of Israel. And her own oppression and experience of injustice is heard by God, with exactly the same words that God later says to Moses. The Lord has heard your misery. So the story of Hagar is more or less an Exodus story, only with the roles reversed. Here it's the Egyptian woman is the one who is liberated from the injustice done to her by those who later liberate her. So, and that's the main important message. The Bible is never one-sided. It distinguishes between right and wrong, justice and injustice, but it refuses any clear attribution to peoples and nations. God is not one-sided, but he is clearly on the side of the weak and marginalized. Perhaps just a final comment on the country from which I speak. The asylum legislation in Germany of the 1949 constitutions comes directly from a time when many Germans were refugees themselves, having lost their possessions, homes, and homelands as a result of war and the injustice perpetrated by the fascist German state. If we are discussing refugees and the right of asylum more and more harshly today in this country, this is also has to do, I think, with a loss of experience and memory. It is perhaps, unfortunately, precisely the long period of peace that makes us insensitive to the experience of others, including so many people who live in this country. Now, I don't want to wish the experience of war and displacement on anyone, which is why the biblical stories tell of them, and that we have to read them as memories of people of faith, which is much more necessary. Abraham and Sarah, Jacob and Rebecca, Ruth, Naomi, they are all economic refugees fleeing from hunger, and they are ancestors of Jesus, who himself had to flee to Egypt with his parents as a small child. So the reading of the memories of the Bible to the refugees should make us sensitive to this experience we perhaps didn't experience ourselves. So I want to conclude with the words of a Christian exegete, Jürgen Ebach, who speaks of the Bible as a migration document, and he writes, "The Bible itself, and according to its testimony, God himself is on the move, crossing borders and promising, in a word from the New Testament letter to the Philippians, a right of citizenship, a home in heaven. Such a double citizenship on earth and in heaven, as it were, makes it possible to shape the world to the best of our abilities and freedom, and with reason, and not to despair that this will only succeed piecemeal at best." So thank you for your attention, and thank you giving me the possibility to speak.
Thank you very much, Professor Sprecher, for this wonderful brief introduction on the biblical perspective on the theme of migrants, refugees, and displaced people, and especially when I'm bringing into the Christian-Muslim perspective, I mean, from a scriptural perspective. So we are looking forward to listening more to the presentation from the European Hub tomorrow. Yeah, thank you very much. And it also gives an introduction to now the keynote speech from Cardinal Michael Czerny, the prefect of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development. And once again, we would like to thank His Eminence, Michael Cardinal Czerny, and the whole team which has been working together with us in preparing for this conference. We cannot take it for granted. And the title of the presentation of His Eminence, Michael Cardinal Czerny, is about migrants, migration, and interreligious dialogue. So let us listen to the Cardinal.
Hello, dear authorities and colleagues. It is nice to be back in Nairobi, even virtually, where I lived for much of the first decade of the new millennium. My task then was to set up the African Jesuit AIDS Network, whose mission is to support Jesuits and their collaborators in responding to HIV and AIDS through facilitation, networking, advocacy, research, and resource mobilization. My thanks to Tangaza's Institute for Interreligious Dialogue and Islamic Studies for this gathering about persons and communities displaced by persecution, injustice, natural disasters, poverty, and war. They are all looking for a place of security where they, and especially their children, can strive for their integral human development. According to the Catholic Church, there are 4 types of interreligious dialogue: theological exchange, religious experience, daily life, and action. In this address, I will focus on the last 2, the actual experience of displacement and how we should act in fellowship with displaced people, especially in interreligious contexts. Faith and displacement. I was a child migrant refugee, 2.5 years of age, when my family fled Czechoslovakia and arrived in Canada. As I grew up, I became increasingly aware of what most refugees and forced migrants experience: the loss of the original homeland. For, however satisfactory life becomes elsewhere, there remains that residual reality that refuses to be collapsed into the present. the loss of culture, language, networks of relationships, ways of interacting with nature, the loss of the world in which each of us first learns how to be a graced creature of God. A competition develops between past and future, between avoiding assimilation and longing for meaningful integration. It takes faith to keep one's hope alive in an eventual healthy balance between the lost and the new. In the long process of healing wounds caused by the direct and structural violence that marks forced displacement, and of learning how to find life-giving hope amid an ever-increasing set of reasons to despair. So, this is the first message I want to share with you. Faith is important for migrants and refugees. They can be a secular phenomenon, like resolute optimism, but for many, it is profoundly religious. In his message for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, Pope Francis defines very well the journey of faith of refugees. Many migrants experience God as their traveling companion, their guide and anchor of salvation. They entrust themselves to him before setting out and seek him in times of need. In him, they find consolation in moments of discouragement. Thanks to him, there are good Samaritans along the way. In prayer, they confide their hopes to him. How many Bibles, copies of the Gospels, prayer books, and rosaries accompany migrants on their journeys across deserts, rivers, seas, and the borders of every continent. Interreligious dialogue based in service. The second point I want to make is about the way of proceeding when serving migrants and refugees. Christianity declares that no person should be excluded, that all are neighbors deserving a respectful welcome. Showing respect to the other person is essential to showing respect to God. This is the universal love of which Jesus speaks in his gospel and which Pope Francis proclaims in Fratelli Tutti. The world exists for everyone because all of us were born with the same dignity. Differences of color, religion, talent, place of birth or residence, and so many others cannot be used to justify the privileges of some over the rights of all. As a community, we have an obligation to ensure that every person lives with dignity and has sufficient opportunities for his or her integral development. For the humanitarian world, this is called the principle of impartiality. It is embodied in serving all individuals based on their needs and vulnerability, not on their ethnicity, religion, or legal status. Jesus requires us to meet the essential needs of others, as Pope Francis constantly teaches, based on the final judgment in Matthew 25. To feed the hungry by ensuring that no one lacks a plate of food, to give drink to the thirsty by ensuring that all have access to water, to clothe the naked so that no family is left out in the cold, to welcome foreigners by avoiding any form of discrimination against migrants, to accompany the sick by ensuring that they are properly cared for in their suffering, and to visit prisoners, whether rehabilitating or not, so that all may live in dignity and grow in human fullness. Indeed, human fullness, not mere survival, should be the horizon of our care. Pope Francis says, "Our faith in Christ, who became poor and was always close to the poor and the outcast, is the basis of our concern for the integral development of society's most neglected members." Many people, unfortunately, face any number of obstacles to the full development of their lives. The Catholic community is called to serve a whole refugee and migrant population, not simply the Christians, nor only members of the Catholic Church. We, in turn, encourage the Catholic community within the refugee body to serve all of their fellow refugees. Some pastors who accompany their flock into exile adapt appropriately. Others need help to appreciate the totally new context and new rules of the game. It is not correct, especially in settlements where all are needy, to limit material assistance to one's own worshiping community. Our energies should confront all sources of division. Let us respect and care for those excluded, of whatever religion, ethnic group, or class. Here's the testimony of a religious working in a refugee camp. It was important for us to feel that we were loved by those whom we served, but not because of what we offered them in terms of goods. It was very easy for the relationship to turn false, and this we tried to avoid from the beginning. But it required time. In the end, this was a gratifying experience. After some time, we witnessed how much refugees appreciated our way of proceeding. One of our refugee colleagues said that he was grateful for the low profile and the constant way of working we had. It was the way of doing and being with them which refugees really appreciated. They said, "You are in the camp in a different way." Interreligious dialogue should work to prevent division while caring for those who journey and when welcoming those who arrive in our communities. The practical welcome we offer to migrants and refugees is the test of the authenticity of this interreligious dialogue and indeed of an authentic faith. The welcome given to a guest is the model for our encounters with refugees. A welcome is what displaced people first need. This is a recurring theme of the Bible. The visitors for whom Abraham, as a good Bedouin, rushed to offer restful shade and prepare a restoring meal at the oaks of Mamre were revealed as the messengers of God's promise. Whether the guest arrives at the expected time or not, we must keep our lamps burning and watch faithfully and patiently. If the visitor arrives in the middle of the night, Jesus tells us to borrow food from our neighbor. How we welcome the stranger is an action of interreligious dialogue. We have a human and pastoral obligation to the basic human right to freedom of worship, whether the refugees are Muslim, Buddhist, or Christian, including the right to worship in their own language and according to their own culture. Conversely, no religious practice may be imposed on refugees by force or subterfuge, such as offering assistance exclusively to those who attend one's religious services. As Pope Francis declares regarding the Beatitudes, Jesus wants us to hunger and thirst for justice, to raise our voices for the voiceless in this manner: be humble, not taken up with pride, success, money, and fame. In solidarity with those who suffer, able to weep with them and to comfort them. Meek, acting without violence or boasting, but with a deep thirst for justice, fighting firmly for the common good and for the rights of the oppressed. We must understand the circumstances, avoid blame and finger-pointing, show compassion and forgiveness. We must live with a pure heart, seeking the good with sincerity and honesty. We must be peacemakers, promoting reconciliation in a world torn by fratricidal wars. We must be willing to face persecution for the sake of justice, remaining steadfast in our faith and commitment to social justice, even in the midst of terrible defamation, willing even to lay down our lives. Displaced people as agents of interreligious dialogue. My third point is about possible actions, since displaced people typically put us in an interreligious reality. We should not regard them as mere beneficiaries, much less as objects, but as active agents whose life experience can enrich interreligious dialogue. For such dialogue to be authentic, it will be important that our presence among migrants and refugees is one of sharing with them, of accompaniment, of walking together along the same path. Let us try to feel what they have felt, suffer as they have, share the same hopes and aspirations, see the world through their eyes. Let us become one with them as, together, we promote a new life of integral human development. How to achieve this? Essentially, with interreligious gatherings at the local and broader levels to reflect together on the experience of migrants and refugees, upholding their rights and proclaiming the message of universal fraternity. Such dialogue, moreover, is not just talk. It includes all the beneficial and constructive interreligious relationships with both individuals and communities of other beliefs. Marvelously, such actions both stem from and increase mutual understanding. This begins with providing a sound and balanced knowledge of the various religions, beyond generalizations and prejudices. It promotes joint actions and cooperation among different faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, governments, and international agencies in order to pursue together what Pope Francis calls the wider we. One family of brothers and sisters in societies that are becoming ever more multi-ethnic and intercultural, where people of various religions, or none, take part in dialogue, where their serene and fruitful coexistence respects legitimate differences. Such dialogue can help to change a migrant settlement or refugee camp from mere survival into an opportunity for growth. In order to learn from the experience of forcibly displaced people, we need to include the ministry to migrants and refugees in local pastoral programs. It will be important to train faith ministers for this dialogue, culturally, theologically, pastorally, and organizationally. Another ministry to foster is forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. Formation for peace can be integrated into regular education or other services. An agent of reconciliation must be close to the people, but not take sides. Reconciliation with one's own past involves remembering what happened, healing the memory, and preparing for the future. For example, with a Christian group, we can offer opportunities and conditions for a change of heart within a liturgical context. Outside of worship occasions, and depending on the culture, communities may be helped through theater and dance, songs and choirs, counseling, and formation of teachers and other leaders. Thus, we may learn from different religious approaches to reconciliation. The responsibility for offering welcome, solidarity, and assistance to displaced people is incumbent, first of all, on the local church. The response can take many different forms: personal contacts, defense of individuals and groups, denouncing injustices which are the root of the evil, lobbying for the passage of laws to guarantee effective protection, education against xenophobia, setting up volunteer groups and emergency funds, spiritual aid. Here we see the Catholic Church's principle of subsidiarity at work. It is the local church which is the first minister. A messenger of hope. In order to foster interreligious dialogue connected to life, we need messengers and leaders of hope. I will now briefly speak about the vision, guidance, and practical example of Pope Francis in this regard. Pope Francis frequently says, everything is connected. He calls continually on the people of the world not to close their eyes to the many sufferings afflicting mankind. We cannot and we must not look the other way in the face of injustice, inequality, the scandal of hunger in the world, of poverty, of children who die because they lack water, food, and necessary health care. Instead, we can unite to rebuild a better common home. The Holy Father speaks frequently about the plight of refugees forced to leave their countries because of conflicts, violence, poverty, or climate change. They often face grim prospects in places where they are not truly welcome. The Pope often reminds the world to remember the dozens of cruel wars killing and destroying around the world. He condemns the huge arms trade. The alternatives are dialogue, diplomacy, disarmament, multilateralism, and the promotion of justice. The Holy Father's encyclical, Laudato Si, alerts us about the urgently needed care for our common home, our land, which generation after generation has been entrusted to our custody by God, so that we may cultivate it and hand it over to our children. It is imperative to do something. For instance, reduce carbon emissions, stop reforestation, recycle, to do something before it is too late. Pope Francis also summons the international community not to look the other way when believers of any faith are persecuted. He says, the use of religion to incite hatred, violence, oppression, extremism, and blind fanaticism, as well as to force people into exile and marginalization, cries out for vengeance from God. Unfortunately, our world is seeing violent attacks on believers and on their religious freedom. Promoting mutual understanding and tackling rising hatred is at the heart of Pope Francis's clear moral teaching. He is a messenger of hope for humanity. He shows the way with concrete gestures, washing the feet of prisoners of different religions on Holy Thursday, bringing Muslim families from a refugee camp to relocate in Rome, visiting mosques and synagogues, signing the landmark declaration, Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together, with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. Dear friends and colleagues, in conclusion, in the words of St. Pope Francis, God not only walks with his people, but also within them, in the sense that he identifies himself with men and women on their journey through history, particularly with the least, the poor, and the marginalized. In this, we see an extension of the mystery of the Incarnation. The migrant, the refugee, the displaced contribute to interreligious dialogue so that the world might believe and hope. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very, very blessed and fruitful conference.
We thank His Eminence Michael Cardinal Czerny for his presentation on interreligious dialogue and migration. He started by his personal experience as a migrant and a refugee. And he developed quite a number of points. The first one is faith as an important aspect for migrants and refugees. That is what sustains them in their difficult situations. He talked about interreligious dialogue as is based on service. No person should be excluded. All of us were born with the same dignity. We have the responsibility to ensure that everybody lives in dignity beyond religious and social status and boundaries. We have a pastoral and human obligation towards the refugees, migrants, and displaced people. Displaced people are agents of interreligious dialogue. And the Cardinal concluded with a message of hope and saying that we need messengers and leaders of hope. And Pope Francis is a model of hope for our humanity today. So thank you very much once again, Your Eminence, for this presentation. And that is now the end of our global opening remarks. And the conference will continue with the Global Ministries University in few hours. So once again, to our viewers and listeners online, thank you for following us as part of this conversation on migrants, refugees, and displaced people. We have a common responsibility to work together because we belong together as children of one and same family with the same dignity. So we continue the conference with the Global Ministry University and the Americas Hub. Thank you very much.